Welcome, everyone. We appreciate you being here today. My name is Natasha Bowden. I'm an associate professor in art and an associate dean for the School of Humanities. Before I give some introductions to our two speakers today, I want to give a little context for the series and a few thank yous. So I'm sure many of you here know this, but for those of you that may not be familiar with Humanities NOW, this series is really envisioned to speak to the potential of the humanities, today, here at Rice, and also at large. The diverse terrain the field encompasses, the new knowledge it creates, and the imperative lens through which it asks us to look. These talks showcase not only the timely research and creativity of our faculty, they also foster connection and conversation. I hope creating a space where we can convene as a community to engage questions and topics that bind us all. It's especially my pleasure to put two artists connected by friendship in conversation today with one another. And Artistic Communion presents, I think, an opportunity for us to consider and better understand what making might offer to the conversation, what kinds of spaces it cracks open for deep thinking across space and time. So first, some thank yous. I want to first thank the Dean's Office staff for getting this event up and running. They helped make this all possible. So Eric, John, Paula, and especially Peyton, who is making this whole thing run smoothly as we speak. I also want to thank English professor Alexander Regier for coming to me with the initial idea to think through how we might celebrate and recognize Andrea for his work. So thanks to Alexander. And last but certainly not least, sincere thanks to both Andrea and John for being game to have the conversation today. Following my introductions, Andrea will take the podium to give a short reading, followed by a conversation artist to artist. And there will be time at the end for questions as we get closer to the hour mark. Following, I hope you'll linger for food, refreshment, and continued conversation to follow. So with that, I will get to the introducing. First up is Andrea Bajani. As light bends, it refracts, and through that refraction, our eyes see color. Andrea Bajani has been described as a prismatic writer. His writing allows us to see through a poetic process of refraction more complex notions of home, identity, the tenuous nature of family, and the mutability of memory. How these ideas pass from one medium to another, thereby changing the path of their meaning, their tone, and their hue. Bajani is one of the most recognized and award-winning novelists of contemporary Italian and European literature today. He has published in a myriad array of forms across poetry, prose, journalistic writing, as well as critical reflections on craft and culture. His novel, If You Kept a Record of Our Sins, translated by Elizabeth Harris and published in the United States by Archipelago Books, received many accolades, including the Super Mondello Prize, the Brancati Prize, the Recanati Prize, among others. He regularly contributes to newspapers La Repubblica and Il Manifesto. In addition, his writing has appeared in Granta, LitHub, McSweeney's, The Believer, and the Massachusetts Review. His latest novel, Il Libro delle Case, The Book of Homes, was a finalist for the Premio Strega and the Premio Campiello that has been published in 20 countries. With much anticipation, his forthcoming novel, La Anniversario, The Anniversary, will appear in January 2025. And Andrea is a professor in the practice in the Department of English, where he teaches creative writing. Joining Andrea in conversation is artist and creator John Sparagana. John Sparagana is an artist tuned to the ideas and processes of the cut and the remix, a deep excavator committed to collage and the possibilities this mindset and practice unlocks. Sparagana's work has been shown in many solo and group exhibitions internationally, most recently with shows in LA, Berlin, Chicago, Houston, New York, and Zürich. His work is included in the collections of the Museum of Contemporary Art LA, the Art Institute of Chicago, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, and the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in Kansas City, to name a few. Sparagana's upcoming exhibition titled Projectile opens October 26th at Basket Books and Art. For those of you that don't know about Basket yet, get yourselves there yesterday or tomorrow as soon as you can. It's a Houston gem for sure. This exhibition will include the release of a new publication of the same name, a collaboration between Sparagana and also the School of Architecture professor Redo Geiser and musician and poet David Grubbs. John is the Grace Christian Vietti Professor of Visual Arts in the chair of my department, the Department of Art, here at Rice. And the last thing I wanted to mention is interesting to note, to me anyway, that both artists' work has been described by other writers as behaving like heavy weather. So with that, we'll see what weather moves in. And join me in welcoming Andrea and John.
Thank you. Thank you, Natasha. Can I just grab some water? So thanks for this invitation. Thanks, John, for being here with me. Thanks to the Dean's office, to the Dean, and to all of you, to my colleagues, and John Waterhouse for helping us kind of spreading the word, and for you guys, and for the students. I'm very grateful to them because they kind of teach me every day what my, not understanding of writing means. It's a shared problem. So I'm very happy that in a few minutes we're gonna talk with John. We'll be in conversation. It's something that I was very happy to with the idea of being in conversation with John, because we kind of have a never-ending conversation that is just going on, emails, texts, meals together, and always sharing doubts. That's what we do. Students, professors, everybody always saying, what can I do? And there's, speaking of doubts, the little piece I'm going to read is part of a longer piece, but I have mercy on you. And this is about, it's the title of this essay is The Curse of Kafka. And it was kind of a meditation on, or a self-forgiving act for not being able to finish some books, meaning not being able to keep writing at a certain point. Because usually we always say, okay, it's very hard to start. Sometimes it's very hard to continue. And why does this happen? Why? There's kind of this snow coming onto our words, and all of a sudden you cannot see anything anymore. And it's about this kind of little graveyard of books I've never finished. The graveyard of books I've never finished takes up 38.8 megabytes on my desktop. All the projects I've never brought to a close. As I'm writing this, 7 novels lie in the small digital graveyard. Some are only a few pages of notes, fragments, passages of dialogue, or photographs, images, web links to check, audio files. Others have dozens of pages that waited a while for others to arrive, but they never did. At a certain point, the writing just stopped, came to a standstill in the nothing of the page. Simply put, there came a point when the novel was gone. The words stopped. In my every attempt to bring the text back to life, to make it breathe through my sentences, was pointless. The novel had gone out. All that preparation of characters, events, actions, dialogue, travels towards some final design, ended in a desert of meaning. Men and women had nothing to say, to tell each other. Nothing more. There were no more trips they wanted to take, no more consoling gestures, no more action producing reactions that could make a man or woman get up of a chair. No questions demanded answers. No one wanted anything more. Everything ended in surrender. White flag, white page. I just sit staring at my screen. I thought about it with friends, asked for help. All they said was, think about Kafka. He almost never finished anything. And then they changed the subject because there was nothing more to say. Yeah? Well, why didn't he? And they didn't know. And I didn't know. And no one knew. And the conversation had already moved on. That unconditional surrender of things and people was too lifelike not to hurt. Didn't I write because life wasn't enough? So I could at least force life into the meaning of a sentence? Didn't I write because I couldn't seem to accept that everything I said and did had no other direction than the senselessness of endlessly doing something? What was I doing with my life, my memories, my pain, even my happiness, if I couldn't at least shape it into a story? I've stopped thinking about the small graveyard of unfinished books for a few years now, or at least I've stopped doing it with the same tortuous hope from before, when knocking on the door of a failed book meant contemplating or anticipating that one day or another someone would eventually open that door to me and I could bring the book back to life. Since then, my periodic visits have only been commemorative for appeasament's sake, a ritualistic gesture, a walk among the headstones, a changing of the flowers. I've opened the folder on my desktop, made sure everything was in its place. The Forgiveness Machine, 2013-2016. The Book of Transplants, 2010-2015. Another novel, 2014-2015, focusing on a local pharmacy in Rome, The Broken Dream of a Pharmacist from the south of Italy, from Puglia, ruined by debt in the era of Big Pharma. Another novel, 2009-2010, a lot of notes and not much writing, a sort of biography of Stalin's son who committed suicide, or so they say, because his father disowned and publicly humiliated him. Then there was the persecution of the doppelganger, 2007-2008, the story of a man's persecution for the sole reason that this man resembled his persecutor's worst enemy. And then finally a novel from an earlier time, 2005-2007, my first real failure. The main character was a boy who loved hockey and whose father worked with businesses that had gone bankrupt. Almost every afternoon, the father brought the boy with him to do inventories of the businesses that had shut down, the employees abandoning the buildings on the spot from 1 minute to the next without warning. The father and son spent hours like this in bombed-out landscapes, everything left as it was before the owner's announcement that the company had gone bankrupt. Pens lying across paper, children's photos sitting on desks, barrettes clipped to drawer handles. The father would list what he saw in a monotone voice, and the boy wrote it all down in a notepad. Then the father would come up with a sum, an economic value to that jumble of failed things. Afternoon went on like this in deserted hangars, exterminated by things. Often rats and gnawed their way into the vending machines. The novel, with the working title The Book of Failures, was set in the winter. Snow everywhere, outside the buildings, and freezing inside because, like everything else, the electricity had been cut off. The father and the boy slowly went from room to room, two clouds rising from their mouths. The boy couldn't stand his father, perhaps due to his age or his pent-up anger. One day, during a fight, he'd shouted that his father was nothing but a grave digger making money off of others' misfortunes. At night, the boy would pull on his skates, his hockey pads and helmet and get on the ice. Here, grace, speed, and violence intertwined. The boy was unbeatable in that dance of blades, but it always ended in a fight. The boy would yank off his gloves, hit someone bare-fisted, hurt him, and get ejected every time. The father would watch and feel troubled, but he never commented. The next afternoon, he'd take the boy with him to do more inventories. There was a silence between them that was hard to decipher. There was also a care to the father's work that moved me as I wrote. And that legacy, the dignity even of giving value to what had failed. This perhaps was something that neither one of them or them could understand. Every time I poke my head inside the graveyard of failed novels, I do so with affection rather than frustration. And even now, as I'm writing this, there seems to be some kind of justice, beauty to this gesture of mine, this writing, giving value to what has failed. As I type these pages on my computer on an early summer morning, I feel I'm wandering around inside those desolate, bombed-out hangars. Except that there aren't any pens lying across paper, no picture in silver frames of sons and daughters. Just these stories left unfinished, gone bankrupt for reasons that will always remain a mystery. Pharmacists, persecutors, the forgiven and the forgivers, surgeons, patients, young hockey players, they'll just stay put, their gestures never fully making sense. Now that I'm doing this inventory on my own, it feels like there's a reason for all this senselessness. Simply that it too has a right to citizenship. It's not a graveyard, but a habitat, a microclimate, the only place possible for these missing stories to survive, to live together, without having to apologize for not being able to end, living like everybody else with extreme effort, sentences unfinished, gestures unrealized, caresses ungiven. Don't I, after all, teach students about the relationship that exists between inventory and invention? Don't I tell them every day that there's no other vision than what arises from taking stock from the inventory, the list of what remains? That inventing is nothing but sitting there just like a father and a son inside a nice cold building and pronouncing in a monotone voice all their life remaining on the table after the end has dropped like an axe, that you have to be brave when you write and hold only half-lives in your hands. Thank you. And the translation was by Elizabeth Harris. It was not written, it was originally written in Italian and then translated into English.
I don't usually have notes when Andrea and I hang out and talk, but so I think we should form a band called Heavy Weather.
Yeah.
My daughter has a band called Big Weather.
What do you think when you think of heavy weather?
I like it. I like it. It's well. I think of it as an analogy for a space to work from, which is one of the things I wanted to talk with you about. I think so. That whole essay in The Believer is quite a prismatic essay. It from beginning to end, it goes so many places, and everything, when you really look at it and think about it, ties together, but not in an oppressive way. You know, so knowing that you were going to read from it, I really kind of thought
Yeah.
around some of the things that came up. And so the space from which one writes or one makes artwork seemed really significant.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a intense quote, to write only when not writing would be dying. I love that. I mean, I often jokingly say if I couldn't work,
Yeah.
I'd shoot myself in the head. You know, like people ask me, you know, as chair, do you have a chance to keep doing your work? It's
Yeah.
like, of course. And if I couldn't, I'd shoot myself in the head. But I think it's the same. It's the same sentiment. But I'm going to swerve. I'm going to ask you a question,
Yeah.
and it's got a swerve. Part of this essay is about when you sent yourself into a self-exile of 11 months of not writing on a writer's residency. And it sounds like a very prestigious writer's residency in Berlin, or in Germany. And with days of walking until you exhausted yourself, sitting at the computer not writing, and it seems like when you did write somewhat, erasing the words, it almost seemed like a project to not write as a kind of a clearing the space. And I'm wondering if that was intentional, or in retrospect, do you see it as intentional, as a way to get back to that, this is also a loose quote, that exact point where the atmosphere exists of between the chaos of dreams and the cold feet, the cold floor under your feet, that being a professional writer interrupted and maybe started to destroy that atmospheric space, that beautiful atmospheric space
Yeah.
that saves your life and gives meaning. I mean, you go into that in the essay, but
Yeah.
was that intentional, or was that?
Yeah.
Do you feel in retrospect that there was some intention to it?
Yeah, 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 yeah. So many things to say, and it's strange. And when we are here, I always wonder. Yeah, when I enter my classroom every other day, I always wonder, what do I have to teach them? What can I teach them if what I would like? Because basically this essay was kind of an attempt to try to say, if only I could not write. No, meaning this heavy weather for me is very interesting, because when I write this kind of what I was saying, there was a line there, the kind of finding a little shelter in a phrase, right? There was this writer from Switzerland, Max Frisch, who said that the peace you can find in a phrase, because life becomes meaningful, meaning all the chaos then can be not solved, but it's meaningful. That phrase, even in between the 1 billion things that you could say about this, you said one thing and it makes sense, right? So it's kind of, so writing is at the same time this looking for the peace in a phrase, and at the same time, so in the kind of chaos, cold, rain, snow, then you have your little fireplace now of a phrase, now the kind of little fireplace of a paragraph where two people are talking. But at the same time, I don't believe in comforting literature, and I don't believe in comforting art. So I kind of want at the same time to have the little fireplace with something where everything is meaningful, and I want a gigantic fire. I don't want things to be just comforting. I just want things to be as they are, and if they have to be hurtful, they will be hurtful. I just want things to be all together and in the mess they are. So it's always kind of this going from one direction to another. And I guess you know, maybe you can also tell us, there's the sense of this essay was also the idea that why do I feel the need of looking for this peace? Why life is not enough? Meaning, why shouldn't I just live the life I have? With my people, with my family, with my books, with my students, why do I feel the need of just breaking and having to phrase something, right? And I remember there was the doctor of our son who at a certain point told me, why are you always talking to him? Can't you just shut up? Meaning, can you just have a meaning for yourself, just being, right? And always going back and forth, and so little by little, this question, this contradiction between having the need of saying something, of finding peace, or trying to shape a phrase in a way that life can be more meaningful, in the other instead of not doing that. This kind of became kind of a method in time, meaning, and that's what I try also to teach my students, or to share with them. I guess that's the truth, is more that to share with them is try to not write as much as you can, meaning practice a lot, but then if you have an idea, try to stop there and wait, and if the idea will survive a month, 2 months, probably there's something that is important there. Otherwise, it's okay to not write. That's a paradoxical. I don't teach only to not write. Would be just thank God creative writing is doing very well, because we also teach how to write. But going to the very point. Now, do not just write because you want to write a beautiful story, but do write because there is something that really matters. And sometimes you can also shut up. You can also not write, right? So for me, that was what was the point. No, yeah. So I was wondering if for you there was this as well, this sense of, as Beckett said, to accommodate the mess. Now, art is the idea of accommodating the mess. So this always kind of contradiction between trying to express and to find a place, a frame for something, to just say, okay, there's this couch, but I can just isolate this one, there's this island of sense, and but yeah. So I was wondering also if it's the case.
Yeah, and the way that I immediately relate to accommodate the mess, I love that statement, is when I was a young artist, I worked in an entirely subjective manner. And it was, very kind of expressionist and intense, and at a certain point I became incredibly sick of my own subjectivity. And since that time, I sort of found my way toward a relationship between a highly subjective aspect that is in tension with quite an objective condition. A really obvious way to think about that is, perceptually based painting or drawing. It's a very subjective response. But in way that I've been working for quite a while now, I start with a totally subjective set of decisions about what I'm going to work with and how I put that together, and it's very intuitive, and I feel my way toward it, and then I apply a system, a procedure, and I follow that procedure, and I don't deviate from that procedure. It's a methodology. It's a little bit like the artist Saul Lewitt's famous statement about conceptual art as a machine for making art. This procedure, which then takes that subjective initial stage and moves it into another condition, often this kind of vibrational field condition, has tremendous surprises. And it's interesting because having made this agreement with myself, there's no, in a sense, there's no failure. I accept anything that procedure manifests with a particular work. The failure would be at the subjective level. And that, hopefully, I'd give enough space to realize it's a waste of time to work with this, because it doesn't, there's no reason for it to be pursued. But if I come to the point where I feel like it's interesting and I want to see what this procedure will do with it, then whatever happens is this microclimate where this work can exist, which is a quote from Andrea's essay in terms of the space, back to the heavy weather, the space where these novels that didn't become finished function. So for me, it is really a way of, I forget the exact term, but like corralling that mess. Accommodating the mess, my God. Those are words to live by. Every day, my God, I wake up and it's like, I must accommodate this mess.
I wake up thinking, what a mess.
Yes.
Then what a mess. Can I go back to sleep? There's something that is very interesting in this, the mess, accommodating the mess, that is kind of, I don't know, I'm not a wise person, and I believe a lot of things in a very kind of passionate way, and the following day I believe the opposite, in the same passionate way. And my wife says, what? You didn't like that very much, now you really like that. Yeah, she knows that she has to accommodate my mess.
You're just chromatic.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I really believe. And again, teaching is, for me, I'm always very happy when I'm there, because it's the thing of accommodating the mess, or how to handle the mess, is very important to me. For instance, thinking of what a novel is, right? What writing means. I don't really believe in genres. I do believe in genres, but I also believe in the idea of literature, of novel, that from the very beginning has always been trying to understand, to experience what a novel is, putting at the time versus theater, images, putting some elements of reportage, and then fiction, and then a lot of things. And I always think that this is the challenge, meaning every time. But it's interesting, but at the same time it's not super balancing, because I basically never have a certainty when I start writing, and I don't assume that I know how to do that. I never assume that I'm good, that I will get to the end of that page. and maybe I can, maybe with a little pat on my back, I could say, okay, you can write a good page. But then ending up building something, a new organism, a new universe, it's another thing. And I never assumed that since I wrote, on the opposite, since I wrote that novel, I know how to do it. Because my very point is every time I wrote it, I already wrote it, but to get to the point where I will be able to write something new, I need to evolve as a person, and I need to understand again or try to figure out what a novel is. And this is something that is not because I want to be original. It's not connected to that. It's just I want to experience this universe another time, what my medium is, what my tools are. And this is at the same time very complicated, because you can then sit in a residency in Germany for 11 months without getting to write a single line, just drinking beer. That's not, it's good for one day or two, but 11 months is a lot. But just because I know how to write a good story, I mean, don't be presumptuous. I know how to write a story, but the point is not how to write a story. The point for me is every time to discover new things, not in terms of plot, but discover new version of reality. And that's why every time I kind of challenge myself, because I want to accommodate the chaos, the mess, and I want, so there's always a responsibility, when you were saying subjectivity means also, should you be more intimate, more personal, and every time I think, okay, but there's not only intimacy, no. Okay, there's intimacy, but then there's the mess outside. Meaning there's not only two people kind of telling the truth to each other, and maybe there's that, but then there's also oil and gas, and then there's also the earthquake, and then there's also how can you let them out, and how can you accept that they just stay outside? How can you kind of look for peace just because I don't believe in peace in terms of writing as the space where all the contradictions can stay together, right? And so for me, this is kind of a school of uncertainty. So every day I start thinking, I'm not able. It's not something they say, you can do that. But it's the only person with whom I share is my son. He's 5 years old, and in the morning he doesn't want to go to school. And he says, I'm afraid, I'm scared. And I say, I'm scared too when I just start writing. But then you will be happy. I'll be happy. So I'll be happy. So let's talk. And usually he's happier after school than I am after a session of writing. But they say, oh, we are very happy. I had a snack too. But this thing of putting myself in a situation of uncertainty, and with this idea of trying to put as many things as I can together, not necessarily I don't have a recipe. I don't know how to do that. And so I just, since I'm Italian, I always have metaphors connected to food. I just open the fridge and then put the things that are there. But yeah, the point is for me that this school of uncertainty is what kind of teaches me how to sit there. And that's why that I say, okay, if you cannot write, that's fine. And probably you have to evolve, and unless you evolve, otherwise you will never write something good. That is too much, it's very personal, but that's the way I live. It's not easy, I know, but that's why I write.
Yeah. Well, it's a few things to say about that. And one is, it really brings to mind is an iconic book by the Zen master Suzuki Roshi called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And the first line is, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. So part of Andrea's essay was about transplants, medical transplants, and how it's remarkable, it's miraculous that we can have these transplants, but the body is always trying to reject it. You essentially have a lifetime of being managed to not reject it, and even at that, it often will. And the analogy around this whole chromatic situation, to my mind, is when you force something, it may work temporarily, never really works, and ultimately it's not going to work. And so tying into keeping that space open, that state of mind, which I think is very difficult. It's like a practice. It's almost like one could think of it as like a spiritual practice. Yeah. Is the only way to go, in a sense, because if you are writing exactly what you know, or writing for a result, it's it's kind of forcing the situation, or that's formulaic, and there's the recipe. It has to be kind of created every time. But I think there's a lot of writing and there's a lot of artwork, just like massive amount, that maybe even was very successful in worldly terms, which didn't really have to be made. And it's kind of in that space of production, to put it in a more amplified way, of forcing. So that was some thoughts around that section of Transplant, which was one of the novels that you were looking into.
Yeah, and that was because every time I start sharing with people the story I'm working on, 100% I will never write it. And still, I'm 49, I keep doing this. And the third or the fourth time they say the story, there's someone inside myself saying, Andrea, okay, you are fucked up. It's finished. You will never write this story. And because of the thing of trying to discover, and if I know already, why should I write it? Meaning, what do I have to discover? Now, and the transplant was one of these situations where I kept telling everybody, and because I spent so much time, because I was very interested in the idea, and I thought everybody should be expert in transplant, meaning in terms and so I spent months with this surgeon. I was his stalker, talking about transplants, and I thought this is very interesting because we should all know more about this. This would explain very much more about immigration, about the danger of things coming, how the body reacts to something that is not part of its body or is not supposed to. And the guy was saying, so I was just asking, little questions, and he was just saying the body will try to destroy it, the thing that is not new. And so I was asking, so how do you manage all these things? But this was just, I was interested in that, and that was enough. Meaning, it's not that at the point I could write a story about this, because that, I don't know, it's also mysterious where sometimes you need to process things through writing, or why I do need to process things through writing, and other times where I'm just interested in that. And sometimes I don't even know, sometimes I even think there are other novels that I never wrote, just because probably in some cases after working 3 years on a novel, then I realized a few years later that it was a poem, a 4-line poem. 3 years of work, and in terms of money you get the difference between a 4-line poem and the novel after wasting 3 years trying to write it down. But it's like this. But this is, I still believe that there's this old-fashioned idea of being inspired, that sometimes things takes their shape, their form. With this book that is there's the Book of Homes, the one that will be published next year in Italy, was just very completely crazy the way it came out. Meaning it came out in my mind. I was just in Rome at the time. I had written a few novels beforehand, so I knew how to write a novel. And I couldn't write, it was just after Germany, after the big failure of 11 months just hitting the wall and drinking beer, good beer. And then all of a sudden, in 5 minutes, I had the vision of something that was completely crazy, meaning it's the story of someone, the story of a person told through the houses he lived in throughout his life. And so it's kind of, there are different chapters, different times, and different spaces where this person is a little boy or a grown-up, and then goes back and forth. And it was something that was not to be original. Meaning, I didn't mean to say, oh, I'm going to write the 20th century novel that is very kind of avant-garde. Nothing at all. I just all of a sudden had this vision, because I finally could put together many things. I wanted to put together the death of Pasolini, the Red Brigades in Italy, my former marriage, the life very painful in the family I come from, and blah blah blah. And in the end, I had just this vision. And I have a vision. No? And it happened, and it's mysterious why it happened. But at that moment, I thought, it's true. Life is not linear. Meaning they don't work this way. And we are at the same time one page, the one we were when we were 15, and the next page of our life we are married, and then all of a sudden there's something very violent happening around us, and all these things are together. And novel is the novel, not only the novel. Art is the place where all these things can go together. But I had to wait. And again, the thing for me that is very, very important, and I'm also, there was a moment for many years, I was just a professional writer, meaning I was just going on tour, readings, and all this stuff, just going from in Europe, or going around the world, presenting books, blah, blah, blah. And then, but living out of this was also for me kind of, since I'm an existential writer, I look for meanings, not for a good story. it was kind of a very oppressive, you know, and meaning I had the publisher asking for the new book, next year a new book, in 2 years a new book, and I had to, meaning to pay my utilities and all my stuff, and so I was just I was just a very existential person in a factory and didn't know how to do anything because I was just completely stressed out, overwhelmed. I want a good story. I want a good story. I don't care about this story. I don't care about this. This was just like this. And at a certain point, I decided that that for me, I didn't want to kind of put on the shoulder, on the back of my writing, the need to make a living. I didn't want. I thought I want to go back to when I was 16 and I started writing. And if I could, the only way for me to survive myself and my family and everything was to write. And I had to write. So I want to go back there. And if for years I will not find the right story or the right way, that's fine. And that's why I'm so grateful also to teaching and to RISE, because I know that I can also evolve together with this community, together with students, together with my colleagues, and get to the point, maybe in 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, that after having written so many novels, so many collections of poems, I just want to wait. And if I have to wait for 10 years, I will wait for 10 years. And, but for sure, after 10 years, again, Italians, the wine would be better. Yeah.
Well, this is how Andrea and I talk when we have lunch. Things evolve. So
yeah.
That 3 years of working on the novel, coming into a 4-line poem, my feeling is ultimately, if that 4-line poem was deeply meaningful, it's so much more valuable.
Oh.
So my father and my sister are in Sarasota, and my father's 97, so can't leave. And it's, this massive thing's about to happen. I was on the phone with my sister this morning. I came into my office here at Rice today, and I had something up on the wall that I hadn't looked at for 2 years. And it is Full fathom 5, thy father lies, of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes, nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. See nymphs hourly ring his knell. And it was like, that is, so, I mean, the mystery of the timing of things, just the mystery of life is phenomenal. But, that's held up, for such a long time, and so many successful published works just, are lost. But to turn back to the atmosphere again, great quotes from Kafka in this essay, and one of the Kafka quotes that I love very much, that I kind of keep in mind, is, "Art is the axe that smashes the frozen river within." And so it's one wants to be in that space, and it's not a given. It's not a given because you're a writer or a painter or a composer that you necessarily can stay in that space. It goes back to the things that you discussed about the school of holding that silence or that space.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was, and I'm not checking the time, so.
Yeah.
We're an hour in, guys.
Okay.
Should I shut up? No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Thank you. Thank you.